Hello, Year Fives, and welcome to our second English lesson for our second week of remote learning. And today we are going to be looking again at commenting on the author's use of language, but this time instead of looking at the author's use of describing character physically, we're going to be talking about how the author describes action. So let's just remind ourselves of what we spoke about yesterday. So, yesterday we asked ourselves the question, why do authors often use physical descriptions of characters? So, think back to yesterday and see if you can then choose either A, B, C, or D. So, do authors use physical descriptions to A, tell the reader what they look like, B, to show the reader the character's role in the story, C, to show the reader how the character is feeling, or D, all of the above? Have a think and choose A, B, C, or D. Okay, so you should have chosen D, all of the above. So we spoke about in particular the way that the Watchman, if you won't remember yesterday, described Beowulf as being head and shoulders above the other men, and this shows us his role in the story, doesn't it? As being a hero who really stands out from the rest of the crowd. And you can also use physical descriptions for the following things. So it should have been D, all of the above. So, yesterday in the story, Beowulf had promised the king, hadn't he, that he was going to rid Herod of this terrible monster of Grendel. And we are going to find out now what happens next as he actually go ahead and do it. So, as you're reading through this section here, I'd like you to think about any words or phrases that give you the impression that Grendel will be killed soon. So be on the lookout for that, and you might want to note them down on your piece of paper as I read through. Had the monster known what awaited him there, he would most surely have thought twice, slunk back to his lair, and never returned, for this would be the last time the beast was ever to go out on a killing spree. So, just as an example, the last time, the last killing spree, I would have highlighted that and I would have noted that down on my piece of paper. Never more would the terror tyrant stalk the land. Now it was his turn to suffer the panic of fear and the pain of death agony. So the giver of death and destruction would become the receiver at last. He did not know it yet, though, and came on unawares to Heorot. Rage racked on, wreckage bent. Grendel ripped open the iron-studded doors. They were no hindrance to him. He scanned the dark hall through fire-blazing eyes, saw the slumbering thane still drowsy in sleep, the solitary, startled sentry, the whole war-band. Rejoicing at the prospect of another flesh feast, this vile and vengeful creature laughed out loud at his good fortune. He would tear each and every one of them to pieces, stain Herod's floor once more with the lifeblood. A night of gore and gluttonous pleasure lay ahead of him, or so it seemed. So, can you find any words that give us the impression that Grendel will be killed soon? So, let's have a look. So you should have got some of these words here. So nevermore would the terror tyrant stalk the land. Had the monster known what had awaited him there, he would surely have thought twice. So the author's giving us clues as to what is going to happen, Grendel, and we can predict through these cues that Grendel is going to be killed by Beowulf. So let's read on then and see exactly what has happened. So as I'm reading through this section here, what you could do now is you could then write down the words that the author uses to describe Grendel's movement using alliteration. And if you remember, alliteration is where you have two words starting with the same letters, and they normally come in after one another in a sentence. So, for example, the crashing and crying that would be an example of alliteration. So have a look now as I read through. What words does the author use to describe Grendel's movement using alliteration? And so it began too. As he snatched up the first Geatish century, he saw Handisco, he was called, and simply tore him apart, bolting his flesh in great gobbets, gnawing and gnashing on his bones, stripping the meat, sucking the veins, until in moments nothing of the poor helpless man was left. Not a hair on his head, not a hand, not a foot, not even a nail. That was just the beginning for him, he thought. On to his next victim he pounced at once, reaching out to grab him with his killing claws. But now he was met with a grip of steel, a grip harder, tighter than he had ever known, that seized him, held him fast by the arm. Locked in the vice of his grip, he could no break free. However much he struggled, and he knew at once that he had met his match. Filled with sudden fear, the monster struggled again and again to unloose his fist, yearning only now to be away from Herot and home again in the safety of his lair. Vainly he tried to pull away, but Beowulf's fingers fastened harder, still in an ever-tightening grip around the callous killer's arm. Locked together in this deadly embrace, they reeled and writhed around the great hall, so that all the Danes could outside hear a dreadful cacophony of crashing and crying resounding through Herot. Gold-worked trappings and iron braces, all well made and sturdy, simply snapped and buckled as the two of them in deadly earnest wrestled and grappled and struggled with one another. Clearly outside they heard the monster's demon scream, his hideous, howling screech. Grendel knew that he was weakening, that his end must be near. He could think of no way to escape. Great-hearted Beowulf, sensing his sagging strength, had him still by the arm, now twisted it and turned it until the shoulder muscles split apart, the tendons snapped, the bone joints burst, and Grendel's arm was ripped and wrenched, bleeding from his body. Then Grendel fled armless and half dead already from Herot. His life's blood was draining from him. He was dying his death. So, what words did you find using alliteration to describe Grendel's movement? Let's have a little look. So, the ones immediately that stand out at the beginning, we had gnawing and gnashing and stripping the meat and sucking the veins. Quite a vivid description, isn't it? And the use of alliteration really makes it stand out, doesn't it? It highlights the actions that he is doing. So that's one way that you can really highlight an action is by using alliteration in your descriptions. And can you spot any others? There was this one here, wasn't there? Where was it? Crashing and crying is another one that you could have picked out. Sturdy and simply, these are others. So he's kind of peppered, hasn't he, with alliteration in that description. So it's quite a vivid description, isn't it, of Beowulf and Grendel, and they're locked in an embrace. They're locked as Beowulf grabs Grendel's arm and he tears it from the shoulder socket. So let's have a look at this bit here. Now it says, in the second paragraph, find and copy a phrase which describes the noise from within the hall. So when you get this kind of question, you need to first of all go to the second paragraph, and you're looking specifically for a phrase which describes the noise from within the hall. So I'm now going to go through the first section here. So locked together in this deadly embrace, they reeled and writhed around the great hall so that all the Danes outside could hear a dreadful cacophony of crashing and crying resounding through Herot. So you should have had this one here, a dreadful cacophony of crashing and crying resounding through Herot. That is the phrase that is describing the awful racket that is going on inside the hall as Beowulf and Grendel are fighting one another. So, in this section, I've just highlighted this bit here, the author has used strong verbs to create this gruesome image of Grendel losing his arm. Can you find synonyms for these verbs? So, I would like you now to think about synonyms for these words here: sagging, twisted, split, snapped, burst, ripped, and wrenched. Have a look at how they're used in the text. And can you find me some synonyms for these words here? And you can write those down on your piece of paper, and you will need to pause the video now. So these are the words that I found. So for sagging, I've put depleting, his depleting strength. Twisted, mangled. Split, I've used the word tore. Snapped, cracked. Burst, exploded. Ripped, used the word prized. And wrenched, forced. And your next step now will be to see if you can use your synonyms and rewrite the description and see how it changes. So use these words here to rewrite the description using your synonyms that you have found. And this is what mine looks like. Great-hearted Beowulf, sensing his depleting strength, had him still by the arm, now mangled it until the shoulders muscles tore apart, the tendons cracked, the bone joints exploded, and Grendel's arm was prized and forced, bleeding from his body. So you can see how using powerful verbs really makes the description, really highlights the action in the description, doesn't it? Right, so King Hrothgar is then delighted with the news that Grendel has finally been defeated. Well, how has he been defeated? Well, if you remember from our reading, he has just had his arm torn off. And what the Danish people do is they then hang Beowulf's arm above the door inside of Heorot, inside the Great Hall, as a trophy. So because King Hrothgar is so delighted with the news that Grendel has finally been defeated, he is now going to have a massive celebration inside the hall. And your task today will be to design a poster to advertise a great celebratory feast which is going to be held in Heorot. So here is an example that I have done. I first of all come up with a big title at the top there: Victory Feast at Heorot. And then I've said who is welcome and when it's going to happen. So everybody is welcome. And I've just given the date there and the time that it's going to occur. I've also put some pictures of Grendel's arm there so that people might want to come and visit that and to see it for themselves. And this is what I've written. People of Denmark, our great hero Beowulf has defeated the wicked Grendel. Come and celebrate tonight at the Great Hall. No more will we have to fear for our lives and the lives of our loved ones. Instead, let us be merry and dance all night to celebrate the beginning of a new era. Come and see the monster's arm hanging from the ceiling. He is truly defeated and we are truly free. So your task for today will be to design a poster. You can include the following. So what is the purpose of the feast? It's to celebrate that Grendel is dead. When and where will it take place? And what will you do at the feast? So I've included that we're going to be doing merrymaking and dancing. You could come and see the trophy above the door there. So think about things that you could do at the feast, and you're going to talk to the people of Denmark directly. So you're going to tell them to come and to celebrate. So give them direct commands to come to the hall and to celebrate in this joyous occasion. Okay, so your task for today is to use this example here to create your own poster to advertise the celebratory feast which is going to be held in Heorot. And you can use that example there to help you. And I look forward to seeing your work.